Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTube man! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Steves! Come to my channel, you know the deal, yo boy, always keeps things real. I'm simply statue, think they slate, dropping unrealistic match, 2K takes for the clip. Even though cats like that get views closer to the millie, never hear me preach, flip on to Philly. Before you watch the Eagles all the way through the early 22, authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal, yo boy, always keeps things real. The 24/7, 365 way, sports content for the reals that feel the day. Good morning, folks. It is June 16th. If you celebrated Father's Day, I hope you had a great Father's Day yesterday. Whether you spent some quality time with your family at home, went out on a boat, enjoyed a barbecue, whatever the case is, hope you had a great Father's Day. Welcome to the start of the new work week for most of y'all. Now, which means for me, being that it's Monday, it is just a few seconds away from 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, meaning it's time for the 3-Point Blitz, where we discuss NFL and NBA-related subjects. But in this case, it's going to be very much an NBA-related stream, and we're going to kick this bad boy off, as we always do with each and every episode. We'll start off with the rant of the week. Ranting about just something, anything that's irking my mind in the sports world. In this case, it is going to be, I was going to talk about Antonio Brown. I'm not really going to. I'll just say a little bit about it. Antonio Brown, that's what happens when you have that type of ego and a guy with millions of dollars and a lack of common sense. This is the type of shit you get. In his case, he's wanted for attempted murder. This is why when you got a guy with that type of ego, narcissism, and lack of common sense, it's dangerous. Kind of like the sports version of Donald Trump without the power. There, I said it. Put it out there. Antonio Brown, that's dangerous. But I'm not even going to rant about AB. I might do something separate about that. What I am going to talk about is the Sixers, actually. Because before I was thinking about coming on here talking about AB, I was actually checking out a video from Mitch. And Mitch did a reaction video to something Marquise Morris Sr. said, going all about the Sixers and Daryl Morey about the way they built it up. And I'm going to take that video, some of what Marcus Morris Sr. said, and use that to rant about the Sixers and the way they built their roster around Embiid. Now, when it comes to the whole Embiid era with the Sixers, I feel like Embiid is part to blame for it, but it is also part. So it's part that, but it's also part the Sixers as well. Get David. David, good morning. Good morning. What is up? The Sixers have themselves to blame as well for their lack of proper building around Embiid. You start the one big issue. One big issue is they haven't been able to consistently build a team with the right guys to contend through the process. And Marcus Morris Sr. broke it down. I'm going to borrow bits and pieces for my rant. because Mark, it's great. I'm glad that I listened to this because Morris, being that Philadelphia native, he relates to it better. Philadelphia's one of those sports cities. It's a very, it's a very fickle city. It's kind of like an in, you're either in or you're out. You either fit or you don't fit type of city. That's the way Philly sports has always been based. And that has also led to both a lot of their successes and shortcomings through all sports, through basketball at the Sixers, which we're mainly going to talk about here, football with the Eagles, the hockey with the Flyers, Phillies with baseball, because it's one of those cities you either fit the mold of the organization or you don't. Now, in the case of the Sixers, they've had Embiid who has fit that mold, Tyrese Maxey who does, but you also have had a lot of guys who haven't fit that mold, who've been here but don't really fit in with the Philadelphia, with the vision. Like with that, you got, like, for example, what I'm talking about, you got guys like Ben Simmons, who was never a fit with the Sixers at all. We know, obviously, that dog mentality that the Sixers have, that tough guy mentality, kind of what Marcus Morris was saying, but they went with Ben Simmons, who was the exact opposite of that. But then you have a guy like TJ McConnell, who seemed like a good role player that could mesh well with the Sixers, but Sixers didn't really want him. He got moved. They decided they needed Buddy Hield, but Buddy Hield didn't really fit in. TJ McConnell's doing pretty solid as a role player for the Pacers, don't you think? More on the Pacers later in this show. But I would certainly believe, for one, that yes, Mr. TJ McConnell is a better fit over there. Then you also take some other players that come to mind. You got Isaiah Joe, who was a solid role player off the bench, who you see now with the Oklahoma City Thunder. While Isaiah Joe is not a star at all, he's not the guy you'd build a team around at all, not even close, with all due respect to Isaiah Joe. But he is a solid role player off the bench, and he's proven well in that role with the Thunder. But ultimately, the Sixers didn't see fit with him, and they passed the buck. Remember, you had Matisse Thybulle, who was one of the better defenders the Sixers have had during the process era, but his offense wasn't elite. They shipped him off, and he's become pretty decent. He's decent on the offensive side. And then you get guys like Tobias Harris, a guy who has kind of a mixed bag in Philly, But then he went to Detroit, and he stayed pretty solid last season with the Detroit Pistons behind Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey and company. But you see, like now in the case, you see what I've noticed is the Sixers have a lot of guys. They don't utilize them in the right role. The biggest problem is they don't know how to utilize talent. That's the biggest problem with putting this all together is the Sixers don't utilize talent well. Look at examples. The guys I just named, like TJ McConnell, Matisse Thybulle, Tobias Harris. Those are guys that with the Sixers were kind of meh or didn't really fit in well there. But then they go somewhere else. They actually produce. They utilize better there. Or Isaiah Joe as well. G League guy, barely played with the Sixers. Seemed like a waste of space because he wasn't being used. But then he went to the Thunder as a bench player and turned out to be a pretty decent bench player. I mean, like I said, not a guy you would ever build a team around at all, but he can at least a guy that can score some points off the bench and at least produce well when utilizing that role, a role the Sixers didn't use him in. Now, his point is you see different examples of guys who were with the Sixers. They go to a different team in a different role and excel. I'm going to emphasize the Tobias one a little bit. Now, Tobias was used as the number 3 guy throughout his entire tenure with the Sixers. But even then, part of the problem with that was he had to get used to being the 3rd guy with a different teammate each time. First, he had to learn to be the number 3 guy behind Ben Simmons. Then when that didn't work out, he had to be the number 3 guy behind Harden. And then he had to be the number 3 guy behind Maxey when Maxey officially took the number 2 spot. So the part of the problem with Tobias Harris is it was part the Sixers constantly switching that big 3 role, Tobias Harris, having to be the number 3 guy, had to get used to a different guy in that number 2 role throughout his tenure. So that was in part of the problem that you could put on the Sixers. Another part of the problem is they put Tobias in a role he wasn't suited in. But you see now at the Pistons, he's in a role he's better suited in as a role player where he doesn't have as much pressure and, he doesn't have as much weight. His scoring he doesn't really have as much of a factor on the games now in Detroit. So there's not as much pressure on him, and he's doing better in that role. Whereas with the Sixers, there was more pressure on Tobias Harris to determine the team's success, and it didn't really work out as well. So you see that's one example there of misusing a guy in Tobias, mainly with the big contract they paid him. They paid him way too much. I mean, geez, me and Mitch called that one out back when he was with the Sixers. But you see, part of the big problem with this whole process is they don't know how to utilize talent. Even Kyle Lowry, who you would think would be a good fit on paper, right? Nick Nurse is the coach. Kyle Lowry played a role in that Toronto Raptors team winning a chip. You would think Kyle Lowry would be a good fit. You would think he'd be perfect at the end of the bench, similar to what Coach Sproul did with Udonis Haslem near the end of his run in Miami. But instead, year one, they overutilized Kyle Lowry. And you saw last season, now that was part due to injuries as well, so I can't fully blame it on the Sixers. But Kyle Lowry being overutilized did more to get people to dislike him being on the roster. But then even then, you see with veterans at the end of their career who could help, like a Lowry, could be that guy at the end of the bench. Instead, he's being utilized more as a starter. He's getting way too many minutes, and it's instead of helping the team and helping the young guys learn, he's on the court being more of a detriment. So that's just one example. Another example of misusing talent. That's really, if anything, the Sixers' biggest problem, more so than not drafting the right guys, not signing the right guys. We've had guys on our roster that excel in other roles. Buddy Hield. The problem more so with the Sixers I'm seeing is not necessarily that they don't know how to get talent. They don't know how to utilize these guys. Because we see they get guys that either, like Buddy Hield, pretty solid with the Pacers, but then he went to the Warriors. He did better with the Warriors than he did with the Sixers. So the problem is the Sixers don't know how to utilize guys. And it's been a problem for years. They got to start learning to utilize all these different talents to their strength that slip through their fingers. Like I just said. I'm trying to think, is there anyone else I didn't mention? Oh, Al Horford. Oh, they tried to bring in Al Horford, but he wasn't the right fit. He didn't fit well playing along Embiid. But really, that was more organizational failure with Elton Brand for not seeing that, maybe Horford and Embiid might not play that well together. Maybe Horford plays well in this situation like he did with the Hawks or now as a role player in Boston, but he fit that role better. Instead, they tried to bring in Horford to a team where he wasn't going to find the right role. Sixers didn't recognize that, so that's another example of failure. But the point being is the 76ers want to blame anyone for these issues, for not getting the right team. They can blame themselves. That goes right to the front office, Daryl Morey. And another point that Marcus Morris Sr. made is Daryl Morey's constant shuffling of guys. I said this in the rant about with Tom Thibodeau getting fired, about how teams, they got to learn that if you keep switching coaches, it's going to be hard to build the right chemistry for a championship team. If the players get used to a different style of coach, if they go from one style of coaching to another, same thing with players. You're constantly switching your starting lineup. It's hard for the coaches that are there and the players that are there to get used to playing with a certain set of guys where you could really have a chance to contend. Remember, it takes time for players to get used to playing together. See, Luka and Kyrie is a recent example. That took a little bit of time for them to get used to playing together. But once it happened, they made a finals run. So the point being is you can't always reshuffle the lineup just because it doesn't click automatically. Because sometimes it takes teams time to build chemistry before it works. I mean, you see the Pacers. It took a little bit of time for them to get rolling, but now they're in a finals run. And that's another mistake Daryl Morey made. First in Houston, switching guys like Chris Paul, and then, going to Russell Westbrook. First it was, but early on, Dwight Howard, Chandler Parsons, and those guys are gone. Then it's Harden and Chris Paul. Then it's, it's just constant shuffling of guys. And now the same thing's going on in Philly, constant shuffling of guys. First Embiid Simmons, then Embiid Harden, then Embiid Maxey. It's just, you can't really get used to that. So the Sixers got to learn how to better utilize talent and put it together properly and be more patient with team building, like the Oklahoma City Thunder, for example. So that's my rant right there about the Sixers. Their biggest issue is they don't know how to properly utilize talent, and that's something they got to work on. But now with that being said, while we're still on the subject of basketball, we will get to the finals. Don't worry, I will get to the finals, but there was a big Father's Day trade I got to talk about before we get to the finals, folks. So yes, yesterday we had a huge trade involving the Memphis Grizzlies and Orlando Magic. Mainly what's known about that is you had Desmond Bane going to the Orlando Magic. Mainly Caldwell Pope and Anthony Black are the main pieces that went to the Grizzlies. And the Grizzlies, look, they're going for a full-blown rebuild, man, because they're also getting future picks out of it. And I guess for Desmond Bane, it'll be interesting to see what happens now that he's getting a fresh start somewhere else, because he was in a situation with the Grizzlies where he excelled as a player, but it wasn't the most functional situation for a number of reasons. Yeah, locker room drama, the trouble with John Morant, the Taylor Jenkins, scrutiny with him as the coach, team not working out that well, and then, they have to get rid of him before the season's over. Yeah, so they had Pete. So I get it. The Grizzlies knew, okay, we had some decent pieces, but it wasn't really working out. The guys weren't playing well enough together to actually make a run. They got to the playoffs, especially with a healthy John Morant, but they couldn't really do anything when they got there. I mean, they even had the one season they got there as the number 2 seed, but they got bounced in the opening round. Now, to some degree, you can also blame that on some of the immaturity of John Morant, which we know about. But, obviously in basketball, hey, you got money locked in John Morant. He's the guy bringing people to the arena, and he's playing the best when he's on the court. So obviously they're going to stick with him, and they're willing to put up with the struggles that come with him being a pain and come with him, they're willing to deal with that. But that's part of the game. What they knew was, so they figured out, how can we rebuild around John Morant? So they decide they're going to send Desmond Bane, bring in Caldwell Pope, Cole Anthony, guys who have experience as role players. Not necessarily starters, but guys who have experience as role players. And they also get a first-round swap with Phoenix 2026. That could be favorable based on the direction the Suns are in. A few Magic 2028, 2030 first-rounders, a 2029 first-round swap as well. The future there, that remains to be determined as to how that's going to work out, because that's a few years down the line. We don't know where the Magic will be by then. We don't know if the Grizzlies will trade away those picks or swap those picks between now and those years. But what we do know is now the Orlando Magic get Desmond Bane. So now they got their big three with Banchero, Wagner, and Bane. Obviously, we'll see as time goes along how it works out, but for Desmond Bane, on paper, he could be in a better situation. I feel like he's with he's with a more mature cast of guys from what we've seen than what he was in dealing with the Grizzlies. So that could benefit him. But obviously, we still got to wait and see. So for the Magic, this could potentially help out. And you only had to give up Caldwell Pope and Cole Anthony, but there's still a possibility the Magic could sign a guy in free agency that could fill that role. There's still the possibility they could find the right guy in the draft that could fall them, that could be a good role player. We still got to wait and see how the Magic fill that void. And for the Grizzlies, what do they do? Because they got the number 16 pick this year as well. So what are they going to do with that? That's a key. So we still got to wait and see, what do the Grizzlies do with their offseason? What do the Magic do with the rest of their offseason? But for the way I see it is, Magic are in win now mode. They're trying to bring an extra guy that can help them win now, improve their playoff performance. And for the Grizzlies, they're trying to get some guys to the future. They know they're not quite ready to win yet, but they're trying to build up for the future so they can win. So we'll see how this pans out in terms of the Magic's win now mode and the Grizzlies build for the future mode. So that's all I'm really going to say now, because like I said, we still got to wait and see what the teams do with their draft and free agency before we get a better assessment of this trade. But with that being said, let's take a 1-minute quick break. We'll be right back. Then we're going to talk about the NBA Finals, folks. All right, folks. Back after a real short break. Now it's time to talk about what everyone's here for. We talked about the trade. We talked a little bit about the Sixers. Mitch, thanks for reacting to the Marcus Morris Sr. video and inspiring my rant of the day. Now it's on to the real subject that you guys want to hear, the NBA Finals. Tonight, folks, we're headed into Game 5 back at OKC, tied 2-2. And we saw we'll just kick off right where we left off. We had Game 4. Yeah, SGA was the hero. Specifically, he scored 15 points in that final 4 minutes and 38 seconds to help the Thunder rally in a game that early on was looking like it was going to be a 3-1 lead for the Pacers, but the Thunder turned it around, got the win, tied it up at 2-2. Check that out for sure. Now we're heading into Game 5, and I feel, hey, this could be anybody's finals still. We've seen these two teams. They played mostly close games, been back and forth. Now, who's got the advantage? It's tough to say because on theory, the Thunder had the advantage, but we've seen the Pacers prove us wrong this entire run. Matter of fact, they've already proved everyone wrong in the finals. Let's just put that out there. Even if regardless of what happens in the next 2, 3, or 4 next 2 to 3 games, they proved everyone wrong because they've already won 2 games. A lot of people are thinking it would be Thunder in 5. Well, we're going to Game 5 tied 2 apiece. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. So definitely, it's definitely a good final. But yeah, so far we've seen SGA. You know, we've seen he's been mostly efficient throughout the finals, but the Pacers, their biggest key is their fast break offense. Because even while the Thunder has outplayed them on defense the entire series, the Pacers' ability to continuously score has helped them win 2 games and kept them in the series. At this point, man, as far as prediction, if you're asking me what I think is going to happen, dude, it's tough to say at this point, man, because you really thought, like, at one minute I'm thinking the Pacers could win this. I really think they could. And there is a part of me that honestly believes that the Indiana Pacers could win this doggone finals and go on to win it. I really do. Part of me does. But then I also think the Thunder have a shot at winning this. Trust me, I wouldn't be surprised if this goes 6 or 7 games. This could be kind of similar to the first Heat Spurs series back in 2013, where it was, they were trading wins. It looked like the Spurs were going to win the finals, but the Miami Heat found a way to win the series and get the upset. We could see, you know what I mean? But yeah, we could see something similar to that here where the spur where we're thinking, okay, yeah, the Spurs are going to, we're thinking, oh, Pacers could win it based on the way they've won games 1 and 3. But at the same time, the Thunder could win it. But that's what makes it so exciting, man. It's what makes it fun, bro. And for anyone, if you guys are coming into the chat, please feel free to comment. Let me know what your predictions are. Who do you got winning? Do you got the Pacers with the upset or the Thunder winning in 6 or 7? Feel free, folks. Comment. Let me know what you think. And you got Aaron Neesmith, though, that's interesting. But throughout this series, like I said, it's mainly the fast break for the Pacers that has been their big key. Now, for the Thunder, to me, through 4 games, the Thunder got to be able to score points. That's their biggest key. Sure, their defense steps up, but like I said, you take with the Pacers fast break, the real counter to that for the Thunder is scoring more points. You got to have a great offense in return. That's your key. Because even in the games that the Pacers won, yeah, the Thunder, for the most part, get most of the steals. But the Pacers were still, game 1 specifically, the OKC Thunder got more steals. But ultimately, the Pacers won because they outscored them. Sure, OKC played better defensively, but who outscored them on offense? And that's the key for the OKC Thunder. And for SGA, man, the pressure's on him because I've noticed something. Games 2 and 4, when he's at his best in the series, when he's on fire offensively, that's what gives the Thunder the edge. So basically, I put it this way. SGA has to play at an elite level in the rest of these games in order for the Thunder to win, because that's the key I've seen so far. When he steps up and he's elite, that's when it matters most. You saw game 4, 35 points, but you saw he got hot late in the game. That played a big difference. He also had 34 against the Pacers in game 2. So when he's scoring 30-plus points, that's giving them the best shot at winning. But let's not forget, he also scored 38 in game 1. What the real key for that in return is that the other guys, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, Alex Caruso, got to step up. What you need is for the OKC Thunder is you got to be pretty much, they got to adjust and be an offensive first team. They can still be a good defensive team, but they got to be offense first. And you got SGA's got to consistently score 30 plus, but you also need some of your other guys like your Jalen Williams is to score at least 20 plus, and someone else, whether that be Holmgren, Alex Caruso, someone to get high teens, early, low 20s. I mean, you might need 3+ people scoring 20 or more points in order to really have a shot at winning against the Pacers. That's the big adjustment. The Thunder, I mean, they've done it in their games they won, but they got to continue to do it to come out and win that finals for the first time since the late 70s, back in their Supersonics days. That's the big key for the Thunder right there. And for the Pacers, they got to find ways to keep their offense limited. Ironically, the Pacers, the team that's more reliant on offense, has to rely a little bit more on their defense, while the Thunder, who's more reliant on defense than their opponent, while they are relying on offense, they're the one that's more reliant on defense out of the two. Ironically, they got to rely more on their offense. So those are what I've observed so far with this series and where it goes from there. Now, we can ultimately see how this plays out. I think personally, this is going 7 games. I got this going 7 games. Whoever's hot in the fourth quarter of game 7 is winning the finals. I'll put it to you that way. Whoever gets hot in the fourth quarter is winning the finals. And that's what I'm going to say right now. But we're going to have to see what happens. We got game 5 tonight. I'm going to be looking forward to it. I'll be checking it out. Trust me, I'll be doing my YouTube short, talking about it afterward. I won't be really going live much this week. And the reason why is I'm going on vacation. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm going to be gone for about a week. Then I'll be back. 3-Point Blitz, episode 15 on Monday, one day after vacation. I'll be back at it then, folks. So we got to wait and see what's going to happen. So I'm not going to be streaming any of the games, unfortunately. Unless I do decide to go live tonight. Maybe. But I won't be there Thursday, and I won't be there Sunday. Because Sunday, going to be a long drive back from vacation, and I'll be drained by then. But by the time we get to the 3-Point Blitz next week, we'll be able to come on here and crown an NBA champion. Because that's a guarantee. Because Game 7, if needed, will be Sunday. But hey, man, I've enjoyed this series, man. I've enjoyed this series, see what's going on. And I mean, just one more point. For the Pacers, one of their big X factors, as we saw in Game 3, is Benedict Mathurin. Let's not underestimate for the Pacers that X factor. Now, Tyrese Halliburton, we know, has been the guy, but you also got other guys on that team that can score as well. Like you said, even Benedict Mathurin off the bench, we know he can. But then you also got even guys like TJ McConnell's a decent bench piece that we know can score coming off the bench, but even got Siakam, of course, he's the other. We know Siakam's the number 2 guy. In some cases, he could be, but Tyrese Halliburton, like, he's got to get you those 20-plus points. He only had 18 in Game 4. Siakam was the lead scorer. No, with all due respect to Siakam, but the Pacers, though, they need to make, Halliburton's got to stay hot. He's got to continue to score. Even like I said, if Benedict Mathurin can get hot another game or so, that could help them out winning a game. We saw it in Game 3, so that could be another factor, though. But mainly Halliburton scoring 20-plus has been a big factor for the Pacers, something they got to continue with. So I'll make sure we get that, clear out the offensive factors for the Pacers as well. I didn't want to forget that. Yeah, but with that being said, though, man, we'll just kind of recap my thoughts real quick. Going into the home stretch, the 3 biggest, put it this. So here's the 3 biggest keys. My big 3 big keys for both teams, the OKC Thunder and the Indiana Pacers, for the remaining games of the finals, games 5, 6, and if needed, game 7. For the Indiana Pacers, key number 1, Tyrese Halliburton. If he's going to at least get you 20-plus points a game, that can help. That can be a big factor there. Number 2 for the Pacers, limit the OKC Thunder's offense. You try to limit SGA if you can keep, but SGA's been scoring 30-plus points most of the series. If you want to limit if you want anything, you got to try to mainly limit their offense as a whole. If you can keep guys like Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren's efficiency to a minimum and can force SGA to carry the team, that could be a big factor in winning that series. And then winning that series, that's another factor. The third factor is the Pacers got to have guys, somebody else that can score as well beside Halliburton, whether that be Siakam, Benedict Mathurin, or, Miles Turner. You need the Pacers, you got to have scorers across your offense base. That's their third key. Now, for the OKC Thunder, their big 3 keys. Number 1, SGA has to be efficient, especially late in games. If he's efficient and down the home stretch, that's a key factor to them winning it. Secondly, the SGA supporting cast needs to step up big on offense as well. Well, they're not going to be expected to lead the way. Like I said, guys like Jalen Williams, Holmgren, and those guys, Alex Caruso even, those guys, at least 2 of those guys got to be able to get you 20 or more as well as SGA in order to beat out the Pacers. That's the number 2 key for them to win this finals. The third key for them in this one is they got to continue to get those steals and continue to force turnovers. along with keys 1 and 2, because we know their defense has helped them out throughout the season, but especially in this series, they got to rely heavily on their offense. So, but still, defense can help them out, especially in these tight games. So some of those steals, some of those rebounds, they got to keep that going as well. So those are my big three keys for both teams. With that being said, now talking's over. Let's just see what happens. We'll see what goes down Game 5 tonight. Talk about it tomorrow in a YouTube short. After Game 6 Thursday, we'll talk about it in a YouTube short. If it's over, congratulate the winning team. If not, we got to go to a Game 7. We'll have Game 7, talk about them. But either way, now we just time for talking for today's over. Now let's bring on Game 5. Let the two teams play. Let's see who comes out on the winning front, takes a 3-2 lead, and we'll go from there. So with that being said, everyone that tuned in, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this stream. If you haven't done so yet, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe. Whether you're catching this live or you're watching on the replay, I appreciate your support. Hope you have a great rest of your day. We're doing this as always on the Nikki Stees channel. There's a link to subscribe if you're new and you're listening to this. And of course, the Hardcore Sports Network as well. We always rocking it with the Hardcore Sports. And there's the link to that as well. With that being said, have a great rest of your day. It's your boy Nikki Stees signing off. Till next time, peace.